there are those who are more prone to feeling the isolation, the loneliness, the cycle, the depression, the things that come along with it. Because isolation is a couple things. One, it's kind of a state that you're in, but it also has feelings and emotions connected to it. And so,
and what might feel like valid reasons for it.
Oh yeah, because of life transitions and loss. With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoweh's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more. Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, hanging out with the one and only S.J. Jennings.
Correct.
Scott Jennings.
Yes.
I still like S.J.
Yeah, no, way better.
And we are. It feels like we're kicking some dust off of the mics. Rob and I had a little time. And
trying this new format, which, we'll see how this goes. Seems to be going well so far.
Got our engineer Caleb over there at his post. Yo, there Caleb. And best cheesy mustache I know.
Nah, he looks like Chris Evans.
He does.
From that Gray Man movie.
Yeah.
He really does.
When he was the villain? He was the villain? Oh, yeah. That is true. We'll put him in front of the camera at some point. Make sure he gets a chance to defend himself.
That's right.
And then also just a shout out to Serena, who is makes us look good in the end.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are in the new format, doing video as well as the traditional audio podcast for Exploring More.
Yeah.
And we've gotten on the other side of a hurricane.
On the other side of the hurricane,
North Carolina.
Deep into football season, which is great, and
you're going to do it
lots
again?
of fun. I don't know. Yeah. What you guys don't know is this is take two, and
right.
I had already given Michael a hard time about losing to me in fantasy football last week, and I think I'll do it again. So there's still a lot of football season left.
That's what the winners say.
Yeah,
they want to jab you in the armpit.
Yeah.
So anyway, there is more. There is more to come.
There is. That may come back to haunt me.
I don't know. My guys are not doing well. So anyway,
you learned a tough auto pick lesson. I
did.
Will say. You got to set that auto pick.
I did. It was an arranged team, and I
arranged marriages.
I feel like it was in that category. Man, we're not doing well. But anyway, so we're gonna hit a series here. I think we're planning on 4 parts. That before I kind of share the title, SJ, I'm just going to share the backdrop that. We like to talk about things that we're feeling, things that we're experiencing, things that we're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And at Zoweh, especially, we have big hearts to address things that people are dealing with in the kingdom. Disorientation and orientation, right? Hope versus just discouragement.
Mm-hmm.
And so, this is one of those subjects that I'm excited to talk about on one hand, and on the other hand, it just feels there's no way we'll do justice to this, even though we are bumping into this in our lives, but definitely bumping into this in the lives of friends and allies.
Oh yeah,
and it's I thought talking about it, we're gonna in parts 2, 3, and 4 bring in some of the other team members and get them in front of the camera and have some more conversations about it. But so here's the big rollout. This is a series on isolation, and our hope is that we can make kingdom contributions to in a way that would help end isolation.
Right.
And I think about it in this way. It's that story, that illustration of the kid walking the beach, picking up a starfish and throwing it back, and then another starfish, and throwing it back, and a guy comes up and says, hey, bud, what are you doing? I'm rescuing these starfish. And he, looks up and down the beach and says, I mean, son, the beach is full of them.
Mm-hmm.
You really think you're going to make a difference? He picks up one and made a difference to that one.
Right. Yeah, man.
And so, so with that in mind, well, let's dive in. It does. We were talking about off camera. I think it's good to always kind of define something by the terms we want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, symptoms are pretty much easier to talk about than sometimes the pain or hurt. I guess the actual source or cause of that. The pain of isolation being the symptoms in many ways. But let's just try to get our arms around this idea of what it is to suffer from isolation. And
sure.
Synonym or a word that I comes to mind quickly is loneliness.
Oh yeah, of course.
And sometimes it's being alone is loneliness, but I've experienced being with people and feeling alone.
Sure.
And how weighty that can feel.
Yeah, you can feel lonely even in a crowd of people.
Yeah.
Right.
Our friends even.
Right.
Because
you might be going through something, or you just might feel unheard or unseen or misunderstood or something like that just can, you can definitely wind up feeling alone in a room full of people. And it's almost like that's one of the ones that creates a level of desperation.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, here I am, even in the middle of a group of people that I would say are my friends, and I feel isolated. And that's a desperate feeling to that.
So you said you could be dealing with something, right? It's isolation in of itself is dealing with something, but it often comes on the heels of things that you are dealing with.
Right.
And so there's a reality to that just
right.
kind of has to be just put in the conversation that
sure.
It's associated with other things. It's often the result of other things. And it's those other things, whether they're current realities or they're way back in your story.
Yeah, so tied to shame and guilt over something that you did or was done to you, that you are, for whatever reason, fearful about sharing.
Very true.
And oftentimes that fear is justified. Not sure if you can trust the people you're with whatever it is that you've got internally going on. So it's
the way that I look at being alone, or feeling alone, that there's a whole other, and I don't want to minimize isolation. As a matter of fact, I want to try to get so much of it on the table.
Yeah, put a light on it.
That there is these there's the reality of what that feels like. And then there's, for me, sometimes there's this phantom. It feels like I'm isolated, like I'm being told or pushed into that place. And it's not as true as it feels, but it still feels true. And it's usually when I survey my life, I'm considering or processing, or I'm trying to walk with Jesus in a way that for now it's just he and I that know.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the people who that's not even their practice. They don't have Jesus, as far as they might be believers, or maybe they aren't at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if you are, you can be isolated and
Sure.
not walking with him in it, talking with him about it.
Mm-hmm.
So having no one to talk to, having no one to talk about it with, having those fears of if I did, then they'd know.
Yeah.
And so somehow this is better in the shop that is our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow it's better to be not known,
go it alone,
than to risk being known.
Sure.
And sharing, because when we've tried to do that, and this is part of I don't know anybody whose story who doesn't have somebody that they've tried to entrust with something that's hurting or painful, and it not go well.
Right.
Either being told how to feel, being told what to think, that crap is just, it just starts pushing a heart towards, I'm not doing that again.
Right.
So
self-protective.
Yeah. And that's in everybody's story. So you said something that just kind of triggered me with, like maybe they're going through something. And I thought, oh yeah, it's not a maybe.
Right.
And that's our general way of kind of, pushing into something, but that 100% reality,
100% injury rate,
100%, it's not if, it's when, how heavy, how bad, how much. And this has been a season, as we were talking off camera, of the last couple years where, we've kind of been driven by the pandemic and culture into isolation.
Sure. Forced into it.
Like, it was kind of wild for a couple months.
It was.
Like, man, got a lot of stuff done around the house, got a lot of chores, redid the closets, you got a lot of stuff done. But then you start hearing the news and you start feeling the weight of the pandemic, and you start walking in such concern / fear. And at one point you knew far, far, far fewer people who had gotten COVID. And when you heard somebody that did, I got to say, I thought, well, man, they must have screwed up somehow. What did they, did you go get some milk or something?
Right,
did you,
right.
Where did you get it? And so all of that starts to get not exaggerated as much as it just gets elevated.
Even the idea that your face is 2/3 covered when you do go out in public. I mean, that's isolating.
For almost 2 years.
Right. That's an isolating thing.
Yeah.
You can't see when somebody's smiling at you.
Let me put on something, and you put on something, and now we'll definitely have something in between us.
I already have enough of a hard time hearing things. Yeah. Right? I'm hearing impaired, so it's now I can't see somebody's mouth either. It was really isolating, and so thankfully we're coming up out of that. But as you were talking about being in a room of people. And it's not if somebody's going through something, it's whether or not they're in a place where they feel like they're willing to risk sharing it. We've talked about before how the enemy will come and whisper in your ear in those moments, right? And when they come more often, rather than coming with a bald-faced lie, they'll tilt the truth in some way, right?
Yeah.
And just kind of whisper these things to you that drive you further into isolation, because it makes it feel like it's more of a risk than it really is to share. Yeah. I've just experienced that recently, where I was feeling alone in something I was dealing with, and all I could hear in my head was, they'll stop having respect for you. They'll judge you. They'll silently say things about you behind your back. I mean, all this stuff is coming at me with the issue itself was enough to deal with and enough to make me feel alone. And then I have these thoughts that aren't my own coming to me, kind of affirming with this tilt of truth. Because there is a reality that it's a risk to share what's going on in your life and in your heart.
Always.
So there is a reality to it. But what is also a reality is that we can't come to a place of understanding oftentimes on how to defeat or combat isolation on our own. Right? This thing in particular that the enemy uses, I think it's one of his greatest hits. Satan's. Like, he loves to employ isolation and making you feel alone and making you feel isolated. But you can't combat this on your own. Yeah. You need community to come out of isolation.
And that's definitely where we want to go. We have to go at what's the remedy for this? But the cause, guilt, shame, and fear, past story, you tried to share, and whoever you entrusted with that just didn't go well. Again, I just want to say it to name it, that when we tell people what to think or how to feel, especially in this climate where there's you can actually isolate on purpose to go do that with your phone, with your computers, with YouTube, with Instagram, with whatever your social world is through technology. Even that has, you're isolated in that, and it has a sense of whatever the algorithm wants to send to you.
Oh yeah.
Whatever you're liking or you're commenting, you're gonna, I go back. What I think about SJ is, it was about a year and a half ago or so, I think, when Social Dilemma came out, and watching that docu-film
Mm-hmm.
on is like, oh my gosh, this is how it works. This makes sense. We'll talk about dog food, and we'll say dog food, and we'll say dog food one more time, and I'm going to get some ads about dog food.
Yep.
So, in that space, back to the enemy, there are forces watching.
Yep.
There are forces engaging, and to bring it, if it's not hard enough, this actually doesn't make it harder. It actually makes it easier if you bring in the third party, which is the kingdom of darkness that's at work in people's lives. Image bearers were made for relationship. Image bearers were made for relationship.
Mm-hmm.
We were made for intimacy and oneness, connectedness with God and each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So when you said that about the enemy, you are actually holding up probably the greatest cause behind the cause, in effect,
Mm-hmm.
is the kingdom of darkness and the way that they work. So if you're one of our friends and allies, you've heard us we always talk about their role in anything.
Right.
Hope, joy, and here we are in isolation. But so they're always a factor because they're in the larger story. They want to move us away from connecting,
Right,
and community and friendship. So their role can't be underestimated. When you talk about hearing voices and feeling certain ways, that's real.
Yeah, I was doing some research for this topic, and I came across this, and I forgot to write down who said it or who wrote. Anyway, I was just doing a search about isolation, and it's demons always inhabit desolate places. And so if you're in a place of, where your heart feels desolate, you're in this desert place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can come under attack pretty easily.
Yeah. So how it works, the enemy wants to use somebody to bruise you in a way that you want to then retreat away from. So now they've got you moving towards isolation, inviting
Mm-hmm.
you and whispering to you, that's the safest place for you.
Mm-hmm.
You go there, and then they're going to start just like hard press
badgering you
onto you about the very place they invited you to go.
See, nobody loves you.
Right.
See, you're all on your own.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Absolutely brutal.
Yeah.
So I want to read this from about isolation that I thought was fascinating before we take a break, and then we'll come back in and chew on it some more, see if we can continue to get around this. So here's the quote. It's something that every single one of us deals with from time to time. And it occurs often during life transitions, such as a death of a loved one, a divorce, or a move, or a new place. I thought that was interesting.
Right.
That in life's transitions, it can raise up. It can be in this idea of everybody suffers from this. Everybody deals with this from time to time, and it happens to be more prevalent in times of transition.
Man, I immediately think of a guy I was talking to recently who grew up in a military family.
Mm-hmm.
He said before he graduated high school, they moved 23 times.
That's insane.
Can you imagine?
No.
We
moved 4.
I know, and that felt like a lot, right?
That was every couple years it felt like,
Yeah. So, I mean, the idea of being alone and not having anybody in your corner, and it's those transitional periods that it's almost like you're at a point of weakness.
Mm-hmm. This medical website I was looking at, they called this researchers call it reactive loneliness.
Wow.
the reacting to the transition,
Yeah.
you know. And I know there's some funny stuff around like failure to launch,
Yeah. Right.
but that is these transitional times, and it's associated more with a younger person who's not
Mm-hmm.
leaving home.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I think about, my life, and yeah, there's some failure to launch moments, and they weren't just in my 20s.
Right.
My transitions into kind of new adventures and new frontiers, even into Zoweh itself, 15, 16 years ago, I had stayed in a position, in a place that I was for probably a couple years too long,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
failing to launch. And so, trust, courage, hope, those things can not be available sometimes, and create that, and just create that deeper sense of I'm alone, I'm on my own, which is what we believe. If we were going to give it one sign, that human beings, image bearers, suffer from throughout their lives at different points, that's it. I'm on my own.
It's up to me. Yep.
I'm alone.
I got to figure it out.
Right. And so,
it's one of those vows, I think somebody, if they've gone through life and not made that vow or had that said to them,
I don't know
or
anybody.
I
don't, and I'm not saying they don't exist.
I know it.
I've not heard anybody.
It's one of those universal truths, I think, and I think about when you said failure to launch. There's what we often talk about when you say always or never. That's tied to an internal vow or an agreement you've made. And I just remember turning 18 and saying, I don't need to be at home anymore. I'm done. I'm out. And so I had kind of the opposite of failure to launch.
Ready to launch.
I cut everything off,
right.
And I mean, I think there's a lot of guys and women too who probably thought that way, and neither one is necessarily healthy, right?
Yeah.
Because mine was sort of I wanted to launch into doing it all. It is to be. It's up to me. Well, I'm going to do it. Dadgummit, and took off. And so these vows that are tied to our belief systems and the universality of some of these vows, there's nobody that's immune to this threat or reality of isolation or feeling isolated. And I really think a lot of the isolation ends up being self-inflicted based on wounds, vows, and agreements that we've made in our past.
Yeah. So I believe that's true. So if that is true, then there are those who are more prone to feeling the isolation, the loneliness, the cycle, the depression, the things that come along with it. Because isolation is a couple things. One, it's kind of a state that you're in, but it also has feelings and emotions connected to it. And so
and what might feel like valid reasons for it.
Oh yeah, because of life transitions and loss. And so I want to talk about some of this after the break. We're going to take a break, but I want to jump into more of the stories of this and then some of the remedy in this, because this series, we're not the only ones that are going to talk about it. We're going to bring the ladies in and talk about what does this look like for women.
Right.
Bring a couple of the teammates, our friends in, and talk about for men. I think there are.
What's it look like in marriage?
There's certain shades of this that are reveal themselves in genders differently, and then yes, in marriage, definitely. And so,
I do want to say before, so I don't forget to say it, part of the reason that we want to do that, and we talk about these things in that kind of a context and invite different people in and women's team, men's team, couples, all that. Even if you might be listening to the podcast right now and be thinking, well, I'm not struggling with isolation right now. Well, maybe it'll bring light to someone that is in your sphere of influence. It'll help you to understand maybe what your parents were going through, a brother or a sister, or something like that. So I'm always on the lookout for, even when, something comes across my path, like a podcast, And maybe I'm not battling with something, directly related to what they're talking about. Do I know someone who is?
Yeah, and I think in the second half of this, as I look at some prepared notes, is I do want to talk to that girl, that boy, that
Mhm.
guy, that man, that woman, because they have something to offer
Right.
the person in their lives that is experiencing
Mm-hmm.
some of this.
Yeah.
And I want them to be encouraged and equipped that, this is, you could be part of the remedy. So if you're not experiencing this, that's phenomenal.
Mhm.
It's not your turn, or maybe you have gotten through much of this life and story and battle with the enemy without some of those predisposed conditions that seem to make isolation so easy to affect and infect people's lives. So
Yeah.
let's talk about some more of it when we come right back on the Exploring More podcast. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoweh.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoweh on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoweh on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.